Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, OpenStack at the Speed of Business. Before we get started with today's presentation, there are a few items to quickly mention. You should see a taskbar at the bottom of your screen. Each icon is assigned to a particular element of today's webinar. If you're not sure what the icon does, hover over the icon with your mouse and a box will appear to tell you the function. Also, below the slides window, you should see a blank Ask a Question box that allows you to type a question. After you type the question, click Submit to send it to our presenters. Feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar, and our presenters will address as many as possible following the presentation. You can submit any technical questions related to the webinar platform here. Please close down other browser windows or applications that might be splitting your bandwidth, including VPNs, as these might interfere with the audio or video stream. If you experience any connectivity issues, please refresh your browser. Today's session is being recorded, and all registrants will receive an email within 1 to 2 days of the event with a link to view this presentation on demand. So now I'm going to hand it over to today's speakers, Red Hat's Colin Devine and SolidFire's Jeremiah Dooley.
Hello everyone, this is Colin Devine. I am a technical business development manager within the OpenStack BU. Been with Red Hat for about 8.5 years in a number of different roles. But for the last 1.5 years, I've been focused exclusively on making sure that OpenStack is successful with our strategic partners like SolidFire. Very glad to be here today, and thank you very much for joining. Jeremiah?
My name is Jeremiah Dooley. I'm one of the cloud architects over in the technical solutions group at SolidFire. My particular area of focus is on how SolidFire as an all-flash storage array integrates up into our OpenStack ecosystem. And I'm also responsible for the Agile Infrastructure reference architecture program that we'll be talking about today. I've been with SolidFire just a little bit shy of a year at this point, and I'm really looking forward to this. I think we've got a good presentation for you all today. So with that, I guess we shall go ahead and get started here. And I figured probably the best way to kick off today is going to be with a poll. So you'll see the controls on the screen, and you guys can interact with the poll question directly. And to kind of get things kicked off and level set where we are and where everybody in the audience is, we've got a pretty straightforward question. Primarily in your data center, what's the hypervisor that you're using? And we've kind of deliberately left off in production or in test dev or in the lab, so we'll let you respond however it is that you want to. But are you using vSphere? Are you using KVM? Hyper-V, Zen, or is all of this newfangled virtualization stuff not to your liking and bare metal's the only way to go? So we'll give everybody a couple seconds here to respond back. All right. A few more seconds and we'll close out the polling here. Looks like about 70% of you have picked an option. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and look at the polling results. It looks like a little more than half of you, 79 folks, responded back that vSphere is the primary hypervisor, which I think no one on this call is probably surprised with. Followed up with a very strong showing on the KVM side. Thank you to all of our OpenStack friends who most likely made that number possible. And then Hyper-V and Zen and bare metal following on. So I think that's a pretty representative slice of where we see from the larger industry, particularly with hypervisor and the virtualization being a much more common piece. Colin, any surprises there for you?
No, not at all. This is pretty representative. Not surprising that most people here are quite familiar with a virtualization hypervisor. That's the old technology. What they're here to hear is about the next level of technology, the OpenStack and,
yep,
and storage integration.
Excellent. So with that, good segue. What we're looking at here is, and my guess is that as you're all looking at this slide, there will be some nods as we go through here. There's an innovation imperative. There's a curve along which IT is being asked to do more and to do faster, but also there's a curve along which the type of applications that we're looking to deploy and how it is that we're looking to deploy and manage them are changing. And this has been true to some extent for a long time, and the question's been, what is really forcing this change? What's really forcing this imperative down on enterprises today? And really the short answer is that the public cloud here has really changed the game. It's raised the bar on how quickly we need to respond to requests from the enterprise. It's raised the bar on what type of applications and how we can deploy those. It's changed how the consumer relates to the infrastructure and to the IT organization that's providing the raw resources that we turn into a platform that can support workloads. And so when we look at what is the driver for the change or for the perception of the pace picking up on the on the enterprise on the enterprise innovation side, really I think first and foremost we need to look at the public cloud players for the reason for that. And as we move forward, everybody in the ecosystem has their own buzzword for what that desired outcome is, right? So we see some vendors are calling it a software-defined data center, some are calling it IT as a service or private cloud or infrastructure. And really what we're looking at is a next generation environment where we look at infrastructure for what it is. Right? Infrastructure is not the reason that IT exists. Infrastructure is what IT uses in order to be able to build an awesome platform to be able to support the workloads and the business outcomes that the enterprise is looking for. And all of these challenges, right? So the challenges that we had in the legacy data center, it's not that they are completely different, right? We still have many of the same challenges, particularly around the infrastructure and the staffing and the alignment with the business. But what we introduce is essentially those challenges in a whole new context, being able to look at things in terms of how multi-tenant are they, being able to look at things as how can I scale this in a manner that matches how I'm scaling my applications and how I'm scaling the different pieces of my software that I'm using to run the business. And then how can I build self-service and automation into these products by default, right? Not as an add-on, not as a buy a different piece of software, buy a different license for that specific feature, but how can I make these things part of the core tenets, part of the core principles of every piece of the hardware and software stack that I'm using to support those workloads. So with that set up, we tried to define where we are from an industry perspective and kind of what the challenge is. We're going to jump into our next poll question. And obviously, as we go through and we look at all of those challenges and we look at what's driving the innovation on the IT side of it, OpenStack has become one of the most visible, certainly one of the most visible open source projects ever, but easily one of the most visible cloud management platforms that we have. And so what stage do you internally look at yourself and say, that, here's where I am with my OpenStack deployment? I mean, is OpenStack something that you're considering? And I would say that the vast majority of the companies that we talk to certainly fall into this bucket at a minimum. Are you currently testing OpenStack? So have you deployed it in a lab? Have you deployed it in a test dev environment? Are you currently using OpenStack in production? So you have actual business critical or production workloads that are running in it? Or again, does all this stuff is all this stuff boring and you'd much prefer to use something other than OpenStack? So looks like we're at about 60% response. We'll give everybody a couple seconds to finish this up here. And while you're finishing that up, what we're going to do just from a structure standpoint is once this poll is done, we're going to let Colin talk just a little bit about about Red Hat and what they're trying to offer here. So we've set up what the challenge is. We'll talk a little bit about the software side of the equation. We will talk a little bit about SolidFire and what SolidFire is doing from an infrastructure standpoint, and then we'll pull this together in a how do we make 1 and 1 equal 3, with OpenStack being the magic sauce that sits on top of it, and talk a little bit about Agile Infrastructure and what we're doing from a reference architecture standpoint. So we're at about 66%, and one more second, and we'll go ahead. All right, we'll go ahead and close it out, and we'll look at the results. So wow, so almost half of the people attending are considering OpenStack for my cloud. That's pretty exciting. It looks like about 28% are currently testing OpenStack, so 28% of you have gotten your hands dirty and deployed and are looking at all the pieces and how they fit together. 8% of you are using OpenStack in production, which is actually a really good number. And 15% of you are here for the show, are here to figure out what it is and what it does. That's, again, not a whole lot of surprises, but I think a good validation of where we are and where we're headed. So the Agile Infrastructure for OpenStack is what we're going to talk about here. And just to give you a layout of what this is, our partnership with Red Hat is strong on any number of levels. The Agile Infrastructure is probably the most visible of it. How do we take enterprise hardware and an enterprise cloud management platform, and how do we turn it into something special? How do we turn it into something that really impacts the business? Before we get into the infrastructure side of things, I mean, obviously the software here and what Red Hat's done for OpenStack is pretty impressive. So, Colin, do you want to go ahead and pick it up and talk a little bit about the software magic?
Happy to do so. So again, my name is Colin Devine. I'm a technical business development manager here at Red Hat. I've been focused on OpenStack for the last year and a half. Red Hat has been focused on Red Hat has been focused on OpenStack for the last probably about 4 years now. Got in there pretty early as soon as we saw the value that it was bringing to the enterprise. My goal here today is to give you a very brief overview of OpenStack, try to make sure those 15% of you who are unsure walk away a little bit more informed, and especially give you an idea of what Red Hat's trying to do, where we bring value, and answer some of the common questions that I get when I start to talk to people about Red Hat and OpenStack. And so let's just jump into it. As you can see here from the slide, OpenStack is a collection of integrated projects or tools all come together to form a infrastructure as a service product. It's based on Linux. It's written on for Linux as the host. And so when we got into it, we thought, you know what? If we're going to put a Red Hat OpenStack on a Linux, we should probably put on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We feel our goal here is to make OpenStack, that quickly moving technology, consumable for the enterprise customers. It's the exact same thing we did for Linux 15 years ago. We're going to be doing it for OpenStack. And because OpenStack is so tied to the Linux, underlying Linux, we feel we've got the expertise, the entire knowledge base from the kernel, the operating system, the hypervisor, to the management of cloud, the OpenStack, all the way to the manager of managers. We've got the entire stack tool set there, and the knowledge that we bring from the enterprise Linux to the OpenStack world is really going to be able to bring the technology into the consumable for enterprise. At the end of the day, that's what Red Hat does. Takes upstream craziness, makes it consumable, reliable, tested, certified, integrated, hardened for the enterprise use case. So how do we do that, and what are we trying to do here? Well, one thing that I get often asked is, how does Red Hat, integrate with upstream? How do you guys work? I know OpenStack is open source, and there's this OpenStack project. How does that work? Well, the upstream OpenStack project, of which we are, of course, a strong founding member of the OpenStack committee. We have individuals on their board. We've got hundreds of engineers writing code for it. They release their upstream code on a 6-month basis, 6-month cycle. We then take that release, we recompile it into RPM format, and we then ship it out as a project for everyone to download. We call that RDO. Doesn't stand for anything officially. Unofficially, it stands for Red Hat's distribution of OpenStack. As I can see from the slide here, it's based to run on all of the RHEL alternatives out there, be it Fedora or CentOS. And it's intended for the community to use, to play with, to test. It's very similar to our Fedora model, where we have a project out there for everyone to use that helps us, beta test or alpha test our technology before we then productize it. About 2 to 3 months after we release RDO, we release our product based on that. That's Red Hat Enterprise Linux OpenStack platform. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but it's intended to make you understand that Enterprise Linux part of it is very key. We take those 2 to 3 months, we take RDO, and we test it, we certify it with our partners, we QA it, we bang it against the wall really hard, and make sure it's enterprise class technology, and then we're releasing the product. So roughly 2 to 3 months after Upstream is released, we'll be releasing our technology. Upstream released their most recent version, Juno, in November, October-November timeframe. We'll be releasing our release in the very early in the new year. And that's how we release software. Next up is, how do we contribute into this technology? Well, it's like I said before, the strategy we're taking here is very similar to the Linux strategy we did a number of years ago. We're throwing a lot of engineering talent at this problem. It's a very quickly, very rapidly advancing technology because there's a lot of companies in there and they're using it for a lot of different use cases and trying to rapidly mature this product. Red Hat is, of course, focused upstream always. We always do everything upstream first and then have it come back through the cycle to be released as a product. In the last Juno release, we were the #1 contributor versus Codebase, and with our colleagues, Rackspace basically tied for the number of tickets closed. That's how we ensure that we have influence on the direction of the technology. We're not leading. We're not the #1 necessarily in every category, but we're strongly influencing the direction for our customers and our partners at the base level. And what I like to say is code talks and everything else walks. How else do we contribute? Well, we make sure we partner with all the major partners out there that we need to. We have a long tail, as you see on the slide deck in front of you, and then we work very closely, engineering to engineering relationship with our strategic partners like SolidFire, making sure our technology works very closely integrated. As you know, OpenStack is a collection of tools that handles your compute, your networking, your storage. That means everyone needs to be a partner out there as well as a competitor sometimes. It's a very interesting world we live in these days. And just to reemphasize that whole stack, I've got a very busy slide up on the screen right now. Take a minute and parse it. It's a part of a larger slide deck I cut this from, but it lets you see the world what we believe is happening here. We came from a hypervisor virtualization world. It's kind of the world we are living in right now, as Jeremiah mentioned earlier. And we're going to continue to live in that world for the foreseeable future, but it's quickly adapting. At the bottom, you're going to see the hybrid cloud words. Hybrid cloud, from what we, Red Hat, define, is the joining of the public cloud, the Amazons, the Googles, public clouds, with the private cloud technologies they have in your own industry. We believe that there are absolutely use cases for public cloud, and there's absolutely use cases where you're not going to want to put your IP out in that public cloud. You want to use the private cloud, or essentially they use the same tools to manage both your workloads in the public and the private clouds. Red Hat has those tools. We've got the Linux kernel expertise to make sure your operating system is running well. You got the operating system, of course, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We've got the virtualization at the hypervisor level with KVM, the virtualization technology Rev, which is comparable to VMware. We've got OpenStack as your infrastructure as a service, managing all your compute, networking, and storage. And then on top of that, we have a product which is pretty cool, called Cloud Forms, lets you manage your managers. The technology allows you to manage your VMware, your Rev, your OpenStack, and your Amazon resources, all from one single pane of glass, doing API, chargeback, lookback, everything. If you're into OpenStack and you've not heard of Cloud Forms, I highly suggest you look into it. Very cool technology. And with that, we have one more survey question for you guys out there, clearly from our marketing folks. I want to know why, now I'll just read it for you, that'll be easiest. When considering OpenStack as your cloud management platform, what criteria are most important to you? Please choose two. I'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that. Is it cost, TCO? Is the scale out? The hardware integration? The rapid deployability, aka ability to deploy quickly? Is it performance? Or is it security? That's one area that doesn't get beat up enough, is the security aspect.
Oh, it will.
So definitely answer two. Say that again?
I said the security will become a focus. Just give it time.
Absolutely. We live in an interesting world. So I appreciate everyone answering there. I'm going to give you about 5 more seconds to do so. Then we'll review this.
Excellent.
Oh. All right. A few more clicking here. Appreciate it, everybody. And look at that. Top 2 look to be cost and rapid deployability. Yeah, one of the challenge points around infrastructure as a service is the ability to make it into your infrastructure quickly. Cost, always a factor. If it's not, you're lying to yourself. And the other 3 are there. Hardware integration is the lowest. I wonder if hardware integration is just not a challenge as much as it used to be.
Well, and I also think that, and it's actually a good segue, we'll talk about it here in a minute, is hardware integration isn't something I think that people necessarily think of when they, not just OpenStack, but just virtualization in general. How do you use hardware to differentiate your experience at a cloud management platform? And I think that, interestingly, that's something that SolidFire does really well. So hopefully, if we do nothing else by the end of this, we'll start to push the need or the interest in hardware integration a little bit higher. So that's a great poll question. Good results. I like that.
Exactly. Jeremiah, I hand it back to you.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Colin. So we've talked a little bit about the challenges. We talked a little bit about the magic that Red Hat is bringing to the table. So from SolidFire's standpoint, what are we doing with Agile Infrastructure? The goal here is that when we're talking to enterprise customers, we are seeing the reality that customers are rarely buying infrastructure or even cloud management platforms for the sake of themselves. They are focusing those on business outcomes. They're focusing those on the performance and availability of workloads that need to be supported. And so with Agile Infrastructure, what we are doing is attempting to put the entire stack into a single wrapper. So it's not just the storage, although the storage is pretty awesome, and we'll talk about that in a second. It's not just the cloud management stack, which, as you heard from Colin, also has an awful lot of incredible features and functionality going with it. But it also includes the orchestration layer and the applications that sit on top of it. The idea here is that all of these are pointed in a specific outcome, and whether vendors like Red Hat and SolidFire help or not, every enterprise is going through the process of building out these stacks themselves in order to be able to take care of the application. So if we can take any of that work off your plate, if we can take any of that non-recurring engineering cost and fold it into where you're already spending capital dollars today, then the better off it is, not just for you, but the better it is for the vendors to learn what the infrastructure is being used for and be able to drive some of those integration points that we talked about. So what is SolidFire? SolidFire is an all-flash array. We are a scale-out shared nothing node-based architecture array. Today, we're the most scalable all-flash storage system on the planet. We can start at 4 nodes and scale to 100 of them, meaning that in a single storage array, a single point of management, we can go from 48 terabytes to 3.4 petabytes of all-flash storage. That's 7.5 million IOPS out of a single management environment. From a hardware standpoint, it is 100% industry standard. We use 10 gig iSCSI to handle all of the block storage on the back end. We also support 8 and 16 gig fiber channel. The goal here is it gives you all of the benefits of the flash array, right? So it's going to provide better performance. It's going to provide lower latency. We're going to be able to do that at the same price as the enterprise disk that you're buying in the array today. But the hardware is really only a very, very small part of this, right? The flash that sits in the array is not nearly as interesting as what we're doing from a software standpoint on top of it. So if we look at a SolidFire array, everything that we do and all of the features that we bring to market are going to focus around one of these 5 pillars. We're going to make sure that the array always has the ability to scale at the rate and at the increments that our customers need, right? Whether those are larger nodes with more capacity and more I/O or smaller nodes, we want customers to be able to scale out both up and down seamlessly with no interruption and as much as they need to. We want to be able to guarantee performance. One of the features that SolidFire we hang our hat on that we brought to market, particularly in the all-flash array market, is the ability to provide guaranteed IOPS for every volume that gets presented out. Right? Every volume that gets presented off of the storage array has a minimum, a maximum, and a burst amount of IOPS so that we can guarantee that no matter how many applications are running on that one storage array, all of the volumes are going to end up getting the performance that they need. We're going to automate all of the management. Everything from a SolidFire perspective is a REST-based API first and foremost. We are building integrations for customers who need plugins and widgets and help with the orchestration platform that they're using, but the majority of our customers have long since plugged us into their cloud management platform or their orchestration or business management platform that's sitting on top of it, simply using the APIs. The more seamless and invisible we can be there, the better. From a high availability standpoint, we understand that enterprise storage is a mission-critical part of any stack of infrastructure, and that there's no bad day like a bad day with storage. So we are committed to making sure that the data is protected in flight, the data can be encrypted, make sure that all of the individual failure modes, be it an individual disk or an entire node or multiple nodes within the array, that none of that causes any sort of issues with the availability or performance of the array itself. And then finally, the inline efficiency. And this one has become essentially a table stakes for any of the flash vendors, that we're going to be able to drive the utilization, and efficiency of that utilization up simply by putting in place compression and deduplication and thin provisioning to be able to make the use of the storage array more efficient, and by corollary, make the cost of the storage array go down. So rather than dig into all of these, there are 2 of them that I want to look at that are specifically tied to the OpenStack use case. One of the things that we've recognized from a vendor standpoint about OpenStack is that it scales very differently than other cloud management platforms, particularly those of you who came or are coming from a VMware environment. VMware has some built-in governors around how big clusters can be and how many nodes can go together that we just don't see as an obstacle or as a limiter on the OpenStack side. And so the ability to scale the storage becomes much more important in an OpenStack environment, simply because the number of workloads, the amount of instances, all of the things that are being consumed on the OpenStack side have the ability to be equally scalable. So from a scale-out architecture, what we saw from an industry standpoint is that there are really 2 groups of storage arrays. Right? There's a group that can scale in capacity, who are all relatively low on the IOPS side, and then there's a group who can scale pretty quickly on the IOPS side, but are relatively short on capacity. And while these work great for point solutions, as a general purpose storage platform, customers tend to either need to have one of both or end up pushing one in a direction that it's not designed to go from an infrastructure standpoint. What SolidFire wanted to do was build something that's going to scale linearly up and to the right, and from a design standpoint, we can hit any amount of capacity or IOPS that's inside the gray shaded area. Right, so with the 3 different models that we have, varying both the IOPS and the amount of capacity per model, based on the configuration that you put in place and the number of nodes and the type of nodes, you can hit any scalability number that's in the middle. And the goal there being that as your workloads increase, as the business becomes more reliant on the workloads and the applications that are running on OpenStack, we have the ability to make sure that the storage array always has the capacity and the IOPS required to support it. Now, this is great, and it's interesting that we can put this big, huge pool of capacity and an IOPS together, but the other challenge that enterprise storage has in general is this idea that we artificially limit the scale or the size of the pool of storage that we have, specifically because we have no way of providing any sort of QoS within that pool, or at least no easy way of providing any sort of QoS within that pool. And so what you get is what we see here on the left. We have lots and lots of performance being delivered out of the pool. We've got lots of applications using it, but there comes a point in time, it might be during when a report is running, it might be during a backup window, where a small number of those applications end up taking the majority of the performance of the pool and driving down that performance, or what's left for everybody else to be able to use. And this noisy neighbor effect is something that we are, it lends itself well to buying lots and lots and lots of little storage arrays to get around it. And from a SolidFire standpoint, this is the problem we're trying to solve. And so if in practice what we can do is create a fine-grained tier of performance, meaning we can give every volume that gets presented out an individual performance basis, both on the minimum, what IOPS are always going to be available to that volume, but also on the maximum, how many IOPS will that volume ever be able to use so that it doesn't overrun the rest of the stuff on the storage array. What we've done is we've taken our ability to scale and turned it into an asset instead of something that has to be designed around or planned around from a workload standpoint. So we put those 2 things together with the fact that the block storage of SolidFire was literally built for OpenStack. The Cinder project and splitting Cinder out from into its own project that could be focused on and that could be grown and have new features built onto it is something that SolidFire was integral with and involved with from the day it started being discussed. So from an OpenStack integration standpoint, the SolidFire Cinder driver is upstream. There's nothing that you have to download and install. The integration between SolidFire and OpenStack is literally 4 lines of code, 4 lines of configuration in your cinder.conf file. And what we're going to do is we're going to take everything that the SolidFire array is good at, and we're going to pass as much of that functionality into OpenStack as we can. So the ability to set and maintain those QoS levels on a per volume basis, the ability to snap, clone, and manage SolidFire volumes directly from within Horizon, the ability to run OpenStack instances, so you can actually deploy the instances directly on and make them bootable on a SolidFire volume. And we want to completely eliminate all those extra management layers. There's no need to have multiple arrays or have an OpenStack array versus a bare metal array for my Oracle environments. We wanted to be able to eliminate all of those extra management layers, both within the OpenStack implementation, but also within the enterprise at large. And again, that's delivered directly into OpenStack. We contribute all of those upstream. There's no additional licensing. There's no additional code that needs to be downloaded and installed. There's no customization that needs to be done to the Horizon portal. It is where OpenStack exists and where OpenStack and Red Hat have built, an enterprise-based, highly performant, fully supported, tested OpenStack environment. The SolidFire storage sits there and does exactly what it's supposed to up through that Cinder driver. So from an AI perspective, we wanted to take the entire infrastructure stack, not just the storage, and we wanted to align it to those same pillars that we talked about from the SolidFire side. So we want the infrastructure, not just the storage, to be agile. We want it to be automated. We want it to be predictable and efficient. And so what we did was, as we built out this environment, we started specifically focusing on ways that we could demonstrate that and ways that we could build that into the infrastructure. On the automated side of things, I think is where we really start to get customers' attention the most. OpenStack has probably rightly a reputation for being a bit of a beast from an install standpoint. Going from zero to OpenStack has traditionally, Red Hat's done a phenomenal job of the packaging and then the installer here. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to show that off. So as part of this reference architecture, as you go through the design guide, we have it set up so that we can, in less than 30 minutes, go from bare metal to OS, and that in less than 30 minutes we can install and configure OpenStack. So once the hardware has been racked and stacked, both compute and networking and storage, we can have a fully production-ready, fully Red Hat supported, fully SolidFire enabled OpenStack environment up and running in an hour. And that's, I think it's fair to say that that would have been challenging to do, a year and a half ago. This is really where, as an OpenStack consumer, I look at what Red Hat's done in this space and am pleased with it. Being able to give it more of that enterprise installation process, both from a support and from a packaging standpoint, has really been useful. But then, showing how we put QoS in there, showing how we can be as efficient as possible within both the data center with the rack space, but also with the storage as well, was a large part of what we're trying to drive there from an AI standpoint. And when you look at it, it looks just like a stack of boring hardware, right? So the idea here was not to differentiate on the hardware side. There's nothing crazy going on from a networking standpoint. There's nothing crazy going on from how the individual compute nodes are configured. What we really wanted to drive was as much density to match the way that applications are being deployed in OpenStack as we could, knowing that if we put those densities in place, then the operational efficiencies, both from a cost and footprint standpoint, but also from a native multi-tenancy and from a cloud scale management and orchestration standpoint, would be there. And that framework is designed not just around the OpenStack platform. As you can see here, the Red Hat Enterprise Linux OpenStack platform really is the core, along with the SolidFire Element OS that we build the solution out from. What we know is that there's stuff that lives above the OpenStack APIs that needs to be taken into account, right? There are custom tools, there are monitoring tools, there are development tools that are being used on top that are being integrated down into the platform and that may be integrated down into multiple platforms or multiple public cloud environments. And from the bottom, the data center and the IT guys still have things that they need to take care of. There's still data center networks. There's still data center services with firewalls and load balancing, and all of these things need to be respected from an enterprise perspective, but also need to be put into the context of the OpenStack environment and of the AI framework here that we've put together. So the integration is designed not just to go up the stack, but down the stack as well. Also interesting, over on the right, you can see that we're using Foreman for the provisioning side of things. And I think that we've become pretty impressed at how far that product has come and what Red Hat's done with it. And so being able to do bare metal booting, being able to do bare metal provisioning, being able to roll that into part of the infrastructure stack really addresses not just day zero, right? Not just the day you turn it on, but particularly in OpenStack environments where there's a constant scaling of the compute side of things in order to be able to handle more applications. Having a process in place to be able to do that is important. We've also built out the networking within AI to match what is possible from an OpenStack standpoint. So the goal here was, when you lay out what OpenStack does and how it does it, there's often confusion around where do my networks live and how do I make these applications publicly available or privately available? How does the iSCSI networking from a SolidFire perspective, how does my private networking, how does all this tie together? And so part of the reason that we put the reference architecture together was to be able to very clearly lay out some best practices around the networking, not just for SolidFire, but for OpenStack and Red Hat as well. So as part of the design, we've got 5 separate secured networks to be able to segregate the traffic out, both from a provisioning standpoint all the way back through the API clients and the management stations that are talking to the SolidFire nodes. So again, everyone that's on this call, you're probably all incredibly smart infrastructure and data center people. You would get to this point on your own if given enough time and resources. If we can take some of that time and money and put it back on your side of the table, I think everybody wins in the long run. And the networking is not just designed to be secure from an OpenStack standpoint, it's also designed to be scalable. So one of the things that we wanted to do that we think is unique from a reference architecture standpoint, particularly with OpenStack, is that the goal here is that you need to be able to scale in any vector. If you need to scale OpenStack nodes, here's how you do it. If you need to be able to scale the storage side of things, here's how you do it. If you need to be able to add upstream bandwidth or additional data centers, or you want to span across racks, and you need to know how to distribute the gear within them to be as available as possible, what we wanted to do was put together a design that understood those constraints, that understood those requests, and was able to put it together into a documentation that was consumable. And then the final thing that we looked at was there's always debate around what applications are appropriate for an OpenStack environment. And as the guy who says every application is appropriate for an OpenStack environment, I recognize that there are workloads that are most often seen there. And so we wanted to very much focus on those. We wanted to focus on test dev, QA staging, and production. We wanted to focus on large-scale web apps. We wanted to focus on how do we provide out persistent block storage, how do we allow customers to consolidate databases and provide database as a service. And so we took all of this, we took what we knew OpenStack was being used for, and we tried to very specifically provide testing and validation for those. So when we look at the very last slide of the presentation, there's a if you want more information. This is probably the most interesting part of the reference architecture that we put together. We not only did the generic tests, right? So the Red Hat OpenStack certification test, which says everything's configured properly and put together, but the Tempest test that shows that all of the OpenStack pieces are doing what they're supposed to. We very seriously drilled into each of those pieces that we knew enterprise customers were going to need. On the deployment side, how do we provision from bare metal to operating system to OpenStack as fast and as repeatedly in as repeatable a fashion as possible? How do we scale? How do we scale in every vector? How do we scale on demand? How do we scale seamlessly? How do we do that without impacting any of the running workloads? How do we make resources agile? One of the things we see people using OpenStack for a lot is, today I need to run these workloads, but tomorrow I will want to run different workloads. And we did some very clear testing around how long it takes to deploy 1,000 instances, how long it takes to delete 1,000 instances, how long does it take to boot those 1,000 volumes as new instances. And so what this ends up doing is very much pointing back at what am I going to get out of this deployment of all of the pieces put together, right? Because the time to boot and the time to deploy new instances really becomes the business outcome that everyone is trying to drive with a reference architecture. We figured we might as well test that and put it in black and white inside the document so that you know exactly what you're getting out of the platform. We also tested the QoS, right? And the QoS being such the centerpiece of what SolidFire is bringing to the table today, we very much wanted to show not just how QoS gets integrated, right? So how we build out volume types and how we deploy volumes with specific QoS on it. But what we wanted to show was how the QoS works in practice, being able to deploy multiple applications. So we built a test harness that deploys a random mix of all of the different applications that you see running there, from database to read-only workloads to general operating system I/O, and show how the QoS isolates and segregates all of those workloads into their own private container. Right? How do we make sure that we don't have to worry about one overrunning the other? And then allowing customers to specify that. So when a customer logs in, when a client logs into the Horizon dashboard and wants to deploy a volume, how do you give them the ability to pick what the IOP capability is of that volume? And being able to do that right directly in, without having to build out any sort of additional functionality or additional code that needs to sit on top of a standard Red Hat OpenStack deployment. So in the end, what we wanted to do was, again, we want to take 1 and 1 and make it 3. We want to take the ecosystem of OpenStack and kind of the promise of what that platform gives us. We want to couple that with the fact that there's nobody on the planet that does open source software for the enterprise better than Red Hat. Right? Be able to take advantage of the pipeline, be able to take advantage of the release process, be able to take advantage of the testing and the stability of the Red Hat offering. Add that in with the block storage that's being provided from SolidFire, and put all of it in a wrapper that makes it consumable by the enterprise in order to solve specific workload or specific availability issues. Right? If we manage best-of-breed design, if we allow true scale-out, if we make the components as modular as possible, if we can get it on the floor and get it running and supporting workloads as fast as humanly possible, and then if we can guarantee the performance of those workloads that are running, what we think we have is the best self-service converged infrastructure for enterprise environments, running OpenStack that is available on the market today. And that's from a goal standpoint, SolidFire is a storage company. But our job is to make that storage integrate in and work and support those workloads as seamlessly as possible. And AI is how we bring that out to market. So if you want to learn more about the Agile Infrastructure reference architecture, there is a full section on how to build the OpenStack-powered cloud with SolidFire. So lots and lots of background on us and our involvement with OpenStack. We also have the AI documentation, so the reference architecture, all of the individual pieces, logical configs, physical configs, interoperability matrices, and then we have the ability to demo those. So we do a fairly robust job in bringing customers in, letting them demo their own workloads, letting them demo sample workloads or synthetic workloads, but being able to see how this works and what it does is one of the things that we put a lot of time and effort into, and would certainly encourage you to join in. So with that, I think we will wrap it up. Is there anything that you wanted to close out with, Colin?
Not from the presentation, but we have a number of good questions. So this is a good segue into our QA. If you have been holding on your questions to ask, now is the time to type them in that little window, and Jeremiah and I will answer as many as possible. We've got a few that have come in already. I'm going to start with one that I think is very interesting, which is this individual. I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. Forgive me, the individual asked it, but they have a VMware installation currently, and they're wondering how they integrate the OpenStack with the VMware. How do they make sure they don't lose that investment? It's a great question, because a lot of the individuals on the call and in the industry have made major investments with VMware, and that's great. VMware is a very impressive technology. From a hypervisor perspective, The virtualization wars, they kind of won that market, and congratulations to them. Unfortunately, the world is moving on. Virtualization, just for virtualization's sake, is no longer enough to get what you need from a ROI. And VMware is facing some challenges from a revenue stream and adapting their technologies to this new cloud world. Good news is, from an OpenStack perspective and a Red Hat Enterprise Linux OpenStack platform perspective, is that we do integrate very nicely with VMware. You can run them side by side and then run the CloudForms technology on top of it. Or, if you so choose, you can use the VMware hypervisor, fully certified to work with Red Hat's OpenStack. OpenStack gives you a lot of options, right? OpenStack gives you a lot of options on your compute. It's certified. Anything with Red Hat Enterprise Linux certification works on Enterprise Linux OpenStack. Platform from a compute side. Networking, we have lots of certifications. And at the hypervisor level, we support our KVM hypervisor, which of course we think is the best hypervisor out there for this use case. But we also understand many customers are using VMware, and we also support integration with the VMware hypervisor. We've come to a support agreement, so if you run that use case, fully supported, and we have a mutual cooperation between our two companies. So there are two ways, like I said, with the CloudForms technology or as a hypervisor level integration. Jeremiah, you got one queued up for yourself? If not, I can jump forward.
Yeah, and I do. These are actually fantastic questions. The VMware one, I think, particularly based on kind of what we saw at the poll at the beginning, from a SolidFire standpoint, we are fully certified and fully tested out with both of the platforms. And I will say that that the vast majority of our customers who are OpenStack customers also have at least some VMware in their environments as well. And part of the beauty of the QoS on the SolidFire platform is that you can run both of those off of the same array. Right? There's no need to isolate those out or segregate those out. And what it means is, as you're ready to move workloads from one platform to the other, you don't have you don't end up with a stranded piece of equipment. You don't end up with capacity that you have to reallocate. So we certainly see customers using both OpenStack and VMware sitting on the same cluster of SolidFire storage fairly regularly. So that's a great question. There were a couple just tactical questions. When talking about the test numbers, is this Ceros instances or something more real? These are full KVM instances, so we did, everything's Red Hat. We're bringing up, using KVM as the hypervisor, we're bringing up full instances of Linux and running whichever workload it was that is part of the test. I encourage you to go out and pull down the reference architecture, because we exhaustively detail all of the tests that we did, and we link to the GitHub repository that has all of the testing and setup scripts in it. So don't take my word for it. If it'll be documented in the AI design guide reference architecture. It's also all available from GitHub. So you can reproduce the tests, you can change the tests to make them more relevant for your environment. Feel free. There was a question about how do we do high availability for block storage. Within a SolidFire array, there's obviously multiple levels of redundancy. We don't use RAID. We use a double helix data protection scheme that is proprietary to SolidFire. So from an HA standpoint, whether we lose a disk or whether we lose an entire node or multiple nodes within the cluster, all of the blocks that are being written and have been written are always protected and distributed across the entire array. So from an HA standpoint, SolidFire handles making sure that the Cinder service and that all of the blocks that are being called are always going to be available from a high availability standpoint.
All right, I'll take two real quickly. I'm going to kind of combine them. One is the OpenStack support the Hyper-V? Not at this time, right? Enterprise Linux OpenStack platform does not support the Hyper-V at this time. That could change in the future. If you're very interested in that, I suggest you talk to the Hyper-V folks and suggest that they work with us. And the other question is, does OpenStack work on x86? Yes, x86, 64-based platforms. Again, if your server is certified for Enterprise Linux, it's certified for Enterprise Linux OpenStack platform. Kind of nice in that way, and we do great certifications across the board there. We have had some interest on the ARM front, as you can imagine, scale out. That's not, not certified as of yet, but we've heard rumblings.
All right, let's see. We've got a couple more. Are there any enterprise-level reference architectures in terms of underlying network to isolate or segregate the network for storage, tenant, and management? Great question. I put up a slide for it, but there's an entire section in the reference architecture that specifically talks about how to do multi-tenancy from a networking perspective on top of the Red Hat Enterprise OpenStack. It's one of the customers, one of the questions we get from customers a lot, seeing how we, as a company, SolidFire started in the service provider space and came down. Being able to do multi-tenancy, not just from the networking, but from the storage standpoint, is something that we've got a fair amount of experience in. So yes, it's in the reference architecture on how to do that on the networking side. If you have any questions, certainly use one of the links that's up on the screen and reach out, and we can certainly handle that. And then does SolidFire support incremental backups? There's a full set of both backup and replication features that are native and built into the SolidFire storage array. We can back up not only to other SolidFire nodes, but we can also back up to any Swift or S3 API-capable object storage platform. So the answer is yes, and there's a lot of goodness kind of wrapped around inside that environment. I would certainly encourage you to reach out to one of those links, and we can dig in. Poor Trudel asks a question: how do you make tape backups with OpenStack? And I think that sounds worthy of a longer discussion, Trudel. Again, reach out to one of these links, and I'm sure we can figure out a way to get from OpenStack all the way back to legacy tape, if that's what the enterprise needs.
We're going to try to answer a few more questions here in the time remaining. It's unlikely we'll be able to answer every single question. That said, we're going to capture these questions, and we're going to reply to them post this webinar as soon as we can. Shouldn't take just a few days. So don't stop the questions, and we're going to try to get as few more in as we can. I've got one here from how do you migrate? What's the important thing to migration from a VMware to an OpenStack? I think it's important to remember, and this is one of those philosophical or kind of how you approach your environment kind of questions. VMware is very good at the virtualization side. I mean, we mentioned that before. Everybody knows that. But the new world that we're moving to quickly is not just about virtualizing or VM management. It's about resource management. It's about making sure you can manage your compute, your storage, and your networking in such a way that gives your end customers, your end users, the ability to succeed in their own needs. And you, as the sysadmin or architect, becomes more of a higher level. It's not just managing VMs; it's managing the resources in your environment to achieve your business goals. And if you haven't thought about it or looked about it like that, it's scale out versus scale up. It's the world which is coming quickly, where you're not going to necessarily have VMs that live for months and years. The workload's going to be VMs that live for days and weeks, and the rapid deploying and then termination of those VMs is really going to be the more common work that you're going to be doing.
Yep.
So that is really the use case of OpenStack. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Yep. And to that point, that was the reason that we drove that as a one of the validation test cases that we used in AI. Was it's not just about can you spin up a VM and then leave it running for years. It's about how quickly can I spin up 1,000 of these because I've got a workload that I need to take care of, or I've got a process that I need to run, and then how quickly can I boot them, and then how quickly can I delete them. So it's very much about how agile can I be with the resources that I have, and I think that from a use case perspective, that's not something that VMware can't do, but the general use case for the workloads that are being run over there is usually a little bit different. So like I said, in most of the environments where we have OpenStack running in an enterprise, and there are many of them, there's almost always going to be a VMware environment that's running, the last of the legacy IT workloads. So we try not to position it as an either/or. There's a suitability for workloads, and there's a continuum along which we change how those workloads service the business. And as the workloads change, the platform that sits underneath them, has the opportunity to change as well.
Just the last one we have, can you move workloads from OpenStack into Amazon? Yes. If you had the CloudForms technology, it uses APIs, REST APIs to do that, and you can do that today.
So I guess to close it out, if what you're looking for is to be able to go from bare metal to OpenStack, from zero to OpenStack as fast as possible, with as little non-recurring engineering time invested as possible, and you're looking to do that in order to be able to run enterprise applications, the SolidFire Agile Infrastructure platform is designed, in conjunction with Red Hat to do exactly that. We encourage you to reach out if you have more questions or if you want more information about either the Red Hat products or the SolidFire products. We'll happily follow up or dig in deeper to anything that we need to. But speaking for SolidFire, I appreciate everyone taking the time. I appreciate everyone, particularly the questions and the poll questions. Getting your feedback is such a spectacular use of these types of environments. I really appreciate it.
And this is Colin Devine saying thank you as well. Thanks for your time, everyone. Cheers.